boys, we brought you the news. Printed the info, we gave you the clues. Owners' profits were always sky high. Changing market now threatens our lives. Post-literation, critical reading, dumbed down nation, signs have been breeding. TV sucking ideas from our head. Public discourse just about dead. We'll ride the dinosaur. Yeah, ride the dinosaur.
Hey everybody, welcome to Navel Gazing, the Valley Indy podcast. My name is Eugene Driscoll. Follow me on Twitter at Valley Indy and on Facebook by searching Valley Independent Sentinel. I just got a little programming note. I'm recording this in my basement. The guest is on my computer phone type thing. My wife is working late. There may be screaming in the background. That's just my kids running around. I just want to throw that out there as a warning. Anyway, read Ansonia Derby Seymour News by visiting valleyindy.org. Those are the communities I cover in the lower Naugatuck Valley of Connecticut. And the Valley Indy, by the way, is a nonprofit independent news site made possible thanks to grants from foundations and donations from readers. And I'm getting text alerts on my phone. How rude. Today, or this evening, or right now, my guest is Rob Caprilozzi of Seymour. Welcome to Navel Gazing, Rob.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
Rob is the director and producer of Halloween in a Box, a documentary that will screen 7 p.m. Friday, October 4th at the Naugatuck Event Center. That's on Rubber Avenue up there in Naugatuck. It's one of a series of events Rob and his wife Christine of the Horror News Network are presenting at the event center in October. For tickets and tons of information, and I'm sure Rob will get into it a little bit as well, but you can visit spookyoctober.com. Is that all correct, Rob? I just want to make sure I'm not messing anything up.
Nope, that sounds perfect.
Okay, and again, like we said, Rob, director, producer of Halloween in a Box. It looks like a fascinating documentary. Documentaries are big right now. And I just saw the other day, this documentary, Halloween in a Box, was recently picked up for distribution and will be available to stream in a couple of days, right, Rob? Actually, before the premiere, people can see it if they want to do it that way, if they're not in Naugatuck. Give me the details on what's going on.
Sure. So it got picked up by a company called Indie Rights. And so it's going to be, they basically, as a distributor, they push it out to streaming channels, video on demand. So it's going to be on Amazon as well as Google Play and a few others. Those are the ones I know. I don't know the others yet because they're still in the process of kind of working to get it uploaded to them. But those are basically the big ones, I would say.
So that has to be huge for you, the fact that this thing is now going to be seen or very much has the potential to be seen. How does that feel just to have that happen?
It's really good. I mean, I've actually worked on the documentary for 4 years. And, embarrassingly enough, a lot of it was, me making mistakes. This is the first real film I've ever made. And, so there was like a bunch of like trial and error when editing. Like I learned, a whole bunch about audio and, I definitely don't claim to be a wizard on that, but there's definitely, so much I learned on, going forward. So the next time, okay, I should do this to make things easier or do this to make things faster. But yes, I started on it 4 years ago. And so, I finally, through once the process was over of me actually completing, I did all like the editing and everything myself.
That's a ton of work. Even just putting this podcast together once a week is a ton of work. So I can't even imagine what this must have been like. But let's before we get too deep into it, let's tell people what this is about. I watched the trailer and I read some of the press that's been out, and you had a ton of press this week when the doc got picked up by a distributor. But it's about basically, generally, the old school plastic Halloween costumes you and I and so many people remember if you grew up, I guess, in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. But it's much more than that. Give me a little flavor of the story you're telling.
Okay. Yeah. Well, what it is, it's, as you mentioned, kids that were our age, growing up in those eras, this was something that you would go to a store every Halloween, and they'd have huge aisles set up, and you would kind of pick through your costume, and it basically, I felt that the company, especially Ben Cooper, who is the most known Halloween in a box manufacturer or Halloween costume manufacturer, played such a huge part, because everybody, you look at those and you pretty much know what they are. It's not something that you look at, which is foreign. Everybody has seen these pictures of costumes or have worn them in the past. So basically what it does is it tells the story of Ben Cooper and their two competitors, which are Halco and Collegeville. And so it kind of talks about, their beginnings, how they got started. It goes really deep into the licensing aspect. So, they talk about how they got one of the stories is how they got the Star Wars license and how they almost missed out on it. Another story is it tells about, how Collegeville picked up the E.T. costume, but all they were able to see was the finger. They were never able to see the creature. So there's a lot of cool stories behind the licensing, but what I think really
is it. Wait, before I know where you're going to go. You're going to go with the hook, but let me just interrupt for 1 second. Is this documentary sort of along the lines of what was it? The toys, the greatest toys, that Netflix documentary about all the.
You know what?
Is it sort of like that?
Honestly, you know what? Honestly, that's in my queue, but I've never watched it.
Okay.
I haven't had a chance to, so I can't say if it is. But there are a lot of it in the Halloween in the Box documentary. There's a lot of cool, licensing stories in there, and what it, there's just like, there's a handful of really cool things. Like if you grew up being a Star Wars fan, it's almost like it's very interesting, and just how Ben Cooper almost missed getting the license on that.
And you didn't see that other documentary, but it sort of sounds similar, because you hear these stories here. I'm 45, grew up with Star Wars, of course. 45. I mean, Star Wars came out in 76, 77, right? So it's always been this giant thing for our generation and every generation since. And then you hear some of these stories how it was like seat of your pants. These guys would be working like out of a phone booth, and suddenly they're getting the license to Star Wars. How it was sort of so accessible before the whole industry took off. But I interrupted you because now, so it's a documentary about these costume manufacturers and their triumphs and getting these licenses and becoming a huge success. But then,
right, so everything was flying high. Like licenses were coming fast and furious. Halloween was an all-time high. And then all of a sudden, in 1982, at the end of September, a bunch of people started dying in the Chicago area, and they found out that it was the first case of domestic terrorism in the United States, which is the Tylenol crisis. Someone was going around poisoning Tylenol pills, and, because of the timing of that made parents very wary to send their kids out trick-or-treating, wondering what they may get in their bags. And a lot of towns across the United States canceled Halloween and trick-or-treating. And so basically what these costume manufacturers had to do, they came together to form this alliance and this public relations campaign. And they put out this campaign which told parents and kids how to have a safe Halloween and basically check your candy and this and that. So it was a story that, it's like showed these fierce competitors in business coming together for a common cause. And it's a really interesting story. And I think my favorite part about it was talking to people, like you and like, people our age. What I did is I had a lot of people send in photos and a lot of people sent in videos of them wearing these from back in the 60s and 70s, some even the 50s. So all the imagery is included in the documentary.
And so the Tylenol Scare, or these murders that happened in '82, I mean, it decimated these companies almost. It almost, I guess it was life or death for them for a while. There was a question of whether they would survive. There was a question of whether Halloween would happen, because the legitimate fear combined with mass hysteria really posed a problem for these companies business-wise, I assume.
That's exactly right, because if trick-or-treating ceased to exist, then the whole costuming and these people's business would be absolutely wiped out. And some of these companies employed hundreds of people. So it was really interesting to see hear how competitors came together to kind of overcome this obstacle that they were faced with. And actually, to this day, the Tylenol murders have never been solved.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Well, that's terrifying.
Yeah, I mean, it was all of a sudden, and the strange thing is, I actually had the opportunity to speak with a woman. It's not included in the documentary, but I actually had the opportunity to speak with one of the daughters of one of the mothers that died in the Tylenol crisis. And she was telling me that there were even reports of, a few days before, like people dying of mysterious deaths or people dying in car accidents, just they couldn't figure out causes. And so, I mean, this thing could have spread wider than, anyone could have ever imagined. But it was definitely interesting to see how this, many people don't know that this is the first terrorist act in the United States, and it was pretty interesting to see how these companies were, how they dealt with this.
And then in terms of how in the wide world of sports, of all the things to make a documentary about, I mean, I remember the Tylenol Scares. I remember wearing my Gene Simmons plastic mask in 1979 when I was in kindergarten. But where did this idea for a story come from, a documentary come from?
Well, you know what? I mean, honestly, to me, that kind of imagery, nothing is as cool to look at, and I mean, it's also really cool to look at, but at the same time, it's also super terrifying. If you see some of these pictures, of these kids wearing these masks, it just looks really creepy. But so I really love looking at like the imagery of people in their Halloween costumes, and it was such a big part of Halloween growing up for me, that Halloween to me was always a good time as a kid. Where, you would go out with your parents and you would go door to door trick or treating. So it was something that it had a good memory for me, and I always remember going out, and I was doing research on the companies, and I found that there really wasn't much.
Well, what made you, let me just interrupt you though, what made you, because I feel the same way you feel, but I never thought to myself, wow, who made my Gene Simmons costume? Like, what made you start to even think like that? I never would have thought to do that. Like, how did that happen?
I mean, I think it goes, I've always been, obviously a horror fan, and Halloween is always my favorite holiday. And I think, I kind of got to that because I was looking at all old photos. I mean, I don't know if you're aware of this, but on eBay you could buy old actual photos of people. And I was like,
what?
Wow, this is really cool. Yeah. So
I have no idea. Wow.
People will find photos of, I don't know if they go to a flea market or someone's tag sale or whatever, they buy old Halloween pictures. And I was like, wow, I was looking at these. I was like, these are really cool. It reminds me of, my time as a kid growing up wearing that. And, I was doing more info, and I couldn't find a lot of info. And that is what really, made me want to kind of get the information.
This podcast is sponsored by valleygivesback.org. Don't get spooked by planned giving. Name a Valley nonprofit in your estate plan and create a legacy that tells future generations what mattered to you. Making a gift that costs nothing during your lifetime is easy and revocable if things change. With a planned gift, you have the power to impact the Valley forever without affecting your current lifestyle. Your action will inspire others to make a difference in their own way. Remember the Valley. Ask your accountant, financial planner, or attorney about plan giving options. Plan now, give later, impact tomorrow. Learn more at valleygivesback.org. So it's like you like the imagery, you have strong memories of it, but there's something about you that's sort of a completionist of some kind. When you get a hold of an idea or something, you just have to get it down to its root, and then. So you were obsessed with this, would you say, or am I just being newspaper reporter like?
No, I think you're right. I mean, I think it's cool. I mean, it's some people are into like Harley Davidsons or whatever, and this is, if you think about it in this aspect, this is a product that touched millions, if not billions, of people in the United States, and there's no information about it at all. Rather than, okay, the company name, who are the people behind it? Why did they do this? Who are some of their employees, and how did they get these licenses? That was something that really interested me, and that's kind of why I went. For the story on this.
You run Horror News Network, and anybody who doesn't know, Rob and his wife Christine also do the CT Horror Fest, which was just held a week or two ago. A fantastic event, the 6th annual one. They're connected to Larry Dwyer of CT Cult Classics, so they're putting on a lot of good programming here in the Naugatuck Valley. But I forgot what I was going to ask you. Oh, I don't mean to belabor the point, but okay, so you could have written a story about this for the website. How did it turn into, I'm going to make a documentary about this? And did you go to film school or anything like that? How did you?
I did. It's funny. I never went to film school, but I do videos for my day job. So that's where I knew the software, and I think what made me want to do a documentary on it is because, on YouTube, I saw a lot of the videos. Like there's a lot of, I wouldn't say a lot, but there's a decent amount of, people uploaded their Halloween from like 1975 or 1968. So, just seeing that imagery was so cool, and like the vintage grainy footage, and I was like, man, I want to put this together and do something more with it, and it just kind of went from there.
And how did you line up your first couple of interviews? I assume, in the trailer it looks like there's some former employees, maybe even some of the bigwigs in there. How did you track them down? How did you get your first interview? Where did you decide, okay, I'm going to start right here?
Well, this was the most difficult part because these companies, both Ben Cooper and Collegeville, both ended in, I believe it was 92 and then 1994. So, this is like, pre-internet.
Pre-internet, yeah. Hard to get info.
And so, right, and those guys, you got to figure that were running the company at least were like in their mid 40s or 50s at that age, right? And so it was really difficult to hunt these guys down. Try doing a search for Cooper and, the last name Cooper, and there's like probably hundreds of thousands of people with that last name, and come to find out, the Cooper I was looking for doesn't even live in the United States. He's in Hong Kong. So,
of course, he's still importing things. He's one of those. He's one of those business guys, I guess, that are always they're always doing something.
He's big,
a madman.
He's big into licensing, and it was crazy because it was really hard.
Well, how'd you get him in Hong Kong? How did you end up getting him?
You know what? I ended up lucking out and getting in touch with someone that knew a brother of his, but they were kind of disconnected. And his brother was in Arizona, and then he kind of gave me a clue that he was in Hong Kong, and then I had to kind of go from there and research and find him through that. So that was the harder one. The other guy still lived in Pennsylvania. That guy that owned Collegeville, and the last owner of Helco. We didn't get to talk to him on film, but he did answer a bunch of questions from us. And his name was Irving Halpern, and I believe he was 97 years old. So,
wow. And they were all happy to talk. They were all.
Yeah, you know what? It was. I think it was a little difficult for them because, their businesses kind of got bought out, and so it wasn't something that they were, I think, overjoyed to speak about. But I think how I presented it to them, that I'm a huge fan, and you guys have touched like so many people's lives with your products, and that's kind of like what got them talking, and they were all nice and good enough to meet me, and we did the interviews, and that was that. So yeah, it was pretty fun and interesting. The stories were really amazing. I met a bunch of amazing people. I met the actual artist that did all the Ben Cooper costumes, Frank Romano. And he's 95 years old. And he's absolutely amazing.
And that's okay. So he was at the CT Horror Fest on September 14th.
Right.
That's so fascinating.
He's actually going to be at the premiere of Halloween in a Box as well. So he's going to be there with his artwork, and we're probably going to do a Q&A after the show. So, I mean, I'm sure there's like tons of stories that guy still has to tell, which hasn't even come out yet.
And then in terms of the Tylenol Scare sort of being, I assume, and I haven't seen the documentary, but of Tylenol Scare being the villain, for lack of a better word, of this story, did you know that going in? Were you aware of the impact that domestic terrorism had on the industry, or was that something you found out as you were doing the interviews and making the doc already?
That's pretty much something I found out as I was doing a little more research.
Okay.
And all that, it was interesting to see. I mean, because people were really scared of losing their jobs, and so that was something that came out. Because originally you wouldn't think, how would the Tylenol Scare affect like a manufacturers of Halloween costumes,
right. Right.
And then when you hear about it, you're like, wow, that's how it can. And I mean, of course, there's like so many other industries. The candy industry is also, had to be affected by that as well, because, back then they were just like dumping things in bags, and, then all the fears of like razors and apples came out, and
still pops up on Facebook every year.
Yeah,
on some of these community pages. Sorry, I interrupted.
No, it's that's exactly kind of like where all of this stemmed from. It was a really scary time. I mean, how it was in the 70s and 80s. You rode your bike with no helmet, and you didn't come in until it was dark outside. Things were much different, and that was kind of like the thing that woke parents up. To think, wow, things aren't all right, so it was a pretty scary time.
And then in terms of local people involved in this doc, like I saw just on Facebook, one of your, I guess the narrators from Shelton. Are there any other Valley folks involved in the making of this, and anybody you want to give a shout out? I'm sure this must have been a team effort to some extent.
Yeah. It's, so Nick Banks, who's also a member of Horror News Network and Connecticut Horror Fest, he has a much better voice than me, and so I asked him to narrate it, and he did an awesome job. And Colleen Caffin also, she also is on the Connecticut Horror Fest team. She, helped me out with script editing, and she, fixed up the script and gave me suggestions. I mean, and my wife helped some of the production coordination, and so it definitely was a team effort, and I'm happy that it's completed. I'm happy that it's to this point where it's getting ready to premiere. So it's really exciting.
Yeah, it is, and it just sounds like a really cool documentary, although I guess I'm biased. Everybody, you know what though? Documentaries are now huge. I mean, Netflix documentaries, there's like one a week. The true crime ones are huge, but then there's all these other ones that are sort of along this lines where there's a nostalgia factor, and
right.
You're just delving into something that you automatically love, and it's a part of your childhood, and to learn so much about it is pretty cool. Now let's go through quickly some of the other events, because this is part of a series of events that you and the team are organizing up there at the Naugatuck Event Center, I guess as part of
Right.
Spooky Halloween. I don't know why I can't speak. I'm stuttering over I haven't even been drinking. I apologize, but it's been a long week. It's Friday. It's been a long week. People have been killing me on Facebook all week. But okay, so go through. Woe is me. What are some of the other events generally that are happening? I know you've got like a talk on the Salem witch trials and beyond,
Yeah,
I guess, the Connecticut part of that.
Right. So basically, we start out with Halloween in a Box on October 4th. On the 5th, we have something which I'm really excited for. We're having someone come up and talk about UFOs. So it's called UFOs Over Connecticut, and he's going to tell some stories about UFOs, about cases in Connecticut and the Hudson Valley, as well as talk about some more national news, which is happening right now. So that's something that we're really excited about. We also have the following week is the legacy of the Connecticut witch trials, which is interesting because actually the Connecticut witch trials happened prior to the Salem witch trials, and so we're going to have a few authors talk about that there, and so some other events we have coming up are we're going to have like a little flea market one weekend where people selling Halloween and basically Halloween items and some horror items, and they're going to be they're the vendors there, and it's free of charge. People could come in and take a look at the vendors, buy what they want. And we also have this paranormal event coming up.
Yes.
That's going to be really cool because we have a few people that are really big in the paranormal field. We have Jason McLeod and the L Words, to name a few. Larry Elward is actually an exorcist and has performed over 100 exorcisms. And these guys have both worked with the Warrens. So
I had a chance to talk
excited.
to. I'm sorry, I keep stepping on you, but I had a chance to talk to Jason McLeod at your CT Horror Fest, and he was telling me Derby stories that happen right here in Derby. He didn't say. I tried to get him to tell me specifically where, because I wanted to know if it was my house or not, but he wouldn't budge on that. But he had some pretty, and I had no idea. Excuse my ignorance. I had no idea who he was or that he had worked with the Warrens. So it was a very interesting interview. And then of course I spelled his last name wrong, which just is great. But anyway, yeah, it's so cool. If people are looking for something to do, Halloween related, there's something to do just about every single weekend, thanks to Rob, Christine, and the team up there at the Naugatuck Event Center. That's awesome.
And you mentioned one event we're throwing, not at the event center. You mentioned Larry earlier. He's doing the Halloween 4 and 5 at the Strand in Seymour.
He's delving deep into the Halloween lineage there with those two.
Exactly, and we just had Danielle Harris and Don Shanks from Halloween 5 at Horror Fest. So
okay, I was going to ask. I couldn't remember which Halloween Danielle Harris fits into, but that's the one, huh?
Yep, 4 and 5. Yep.
Oh, no kidding. All right, yeah, that's awesome. All right, so is there anything else you wanted to add, Rob, or maybe that I haven't asked you that you wanted to stress about Halloween in a Box?
I just think it's nothing off the top of my head. I just think it's a pretty cool story if you like pop culture. The really cool things is learning about like the different licenses, like the Star Wars license, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles license, He-Man, and it's interesting to see how these guys went about obtaining the license, and there's some cool stories behind it.
You know what I got to ask you, though, Rob, before I let you go? What costumes did you have, and did you ask them, like, why were they so blinding? You'd put it on, you were just totally blind in those things.
Yeah, I think that's got to go back to, like, when we were growing up, anything went, man. You sat in the car without a seatbelt. It was just anything went. I wore so many of those costumes. I remember a Wolfman one year, Godzilla.
Wow.
There was tons. There was like I had so many. There's actually a picture of me in like a devil costume, which is included in the documentary as well. I had so many of them, and they were so fun. To me, it was so cool to go to the store and like just be able to like search through all these boxes and see what one you were going to be. That was really cool.
All right, Rob. Hey, thanks a lot for joining me, and best of luck with the documentary. If anybody wants to check it out, you can see it in person, 7 p.m. Friday, October 4th at the Naugatuck Event Center, or you can check it out streaming on services such as Amazon and others. October 1st, is that correct? It'll be on that early?
October 1st.
October,
That's right. Mm-hmm. Just
October
in time
1st.
for Halloween.
Awesome. All right, Rob, happy Halloween, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Have a good night.
You too.
For hundreds of years we've brought you the news. Printed the info, we gave you the clues. Owners' profits were always sky high. Changing market now threatens our lives. Post-literation, critical reading, dumbed down nation, signs have been breeding. TV sucking ideas from our head. Public discourse just about dead. We'll ride the dinosaur. Yeah, ride the dinosaur. Our readers are in the opens each day. Online clickbait, a prurient way. It's free information here to stay. Not even hookers give it away. Advertising, metastasizing, newsroom shrinking, constant attrition. We'll ride the dinosaur. We'll ride the dinosaur. Dinosaur. Deadlines, bylines, pictures too. Editorial comment for a buck or two. Fire down the block, the murder next door. And now we wonder what it's all for. Social media coming free to you, funny pages, the mayor's wages, criminal seats, corruption schemes, ink state wretches asking tough questions. We'll ride the dinosaur. Yeah, ride the dinosaur. The presses are running all through the night. We're printing the truth with all of our might. We're platform agnostics, got that interweb too. Buy an ad, see what we can do. We still have subscribers, still have our fans. We're here every day, so give us a chance or we'll make an art stand. Just hold us in your hand and we'll ride the dinosaur. Yeah, ride the dinosaur.